We are recording. Okay. Welcome everybody. I am Marcy Glass. I'm the Alumni Council President. And we have some time this morning with our 10th president of Columbia, Dr. Leanne Van Dyke, who's going to be retiring in June. For the last 7 years, she has led us faithfully through a time of great transition. And 2 of those years count as 40 years in the pandemic times. So we are so grateful, Leanne, for your leadership among us, and want to spend some time with you this afternoon give you a chance to reflect on your time with us. So I'll let you start off telling us a little bit more about what your time at Columbia has meant to you, and maybe talk about what you've been most proud of and where you hope to see Columbia move as we head into our 3rd century of ministry.
Great. Thanks, Marcy. Greetings, everyone. It's nice to see your little square faces on my screen. We're so used to that now, aren't we? I'm really grateful for having a little piece of the agenda. Thanks to the Colloquium planners for thinking of this and allowing me to just address you directly for a few minutes. And then I'm going to be really interested to hear any comments or questions from you. I'm really grateful for the remarkable opportunity I've had to lead Columbia Seminary for the past 7 years. I'm grateful also for some of the achievements that I've been a part of that have helped to further and motivate the mission of the seminary. I am grateful that we now have a faculty skilled in online learning. I came in with this commitment. It was part of my interview, I remember, and we are now there. I am grateful that we have taken strides forward in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Not without growing pains, mind you, which is to be expected, but certainly we are on the way. I am grateful that what many of you knew as the NRH is now the Marcia Riggs Commons, a name etched in stone on that building, and so appropriate for our first Black faculty member, a notable woman ethicist, and the longest serving faculty member on our faculty at the moment. I am grateful that the Board of Trustees approved the Repairing the Breach document in the summer of 2020. And we are now living into the commitments made in that document. I am grateful that we have received numerous large grants during my time here, including the most recent one that brought in $1 million to our efforts to train pastoral leaders. I am grateful that we completed the goals of our 2017 strategic plan, and we are now very close to completing and sharing the 2022 new vision statement. Stay tuned. When we put in the little finishing touches to it, we will blast that out to everyone. I am grateful that I had the privilege to serve with terrific colleagues, the faculty, the staff, my vice presidents, and all of the President's Council. Finally, I am grateful that I was able to attend both to internal administrative and leadership challenges and external constituency relationships. One of my favorite things was visiting your congregations, alumni. I so enjoyed preaching, teaching, meeting the people in your congregations, and learning directly from you all the ministries that you are leading. This truly encouraged me and made me come back to Columbia Seminary thinking even more determination for the mission that we have. Thank you for being so hospitable in those many visits. Now, there are things I wish I could have done. When I arrived here in 2015, The board was hoping to launch a capital campaign, and I was eager to lean in to that challenge. But the board carefully discerned that we should only do a campaign when we are really ready. That day is coming, I believe, and I see my colleague David Huffine on the screen. I know that he is working hard for that day, but it did not happen in my presidency. I wish I could have traveled more and visited more of you. The last 2 years of the pandemic, my professional travel was shut down and is now just beginning again. I wish I could have told even more people about the mission of Columbia. I wish I could have visited more international partners. Steve Hayner, my predecessor, many of you know, had strong relational ties to the Presbyterian Church in Kenya, and it was my hope to carry that on. But I did not get a chance to go, even though I was warmly invited by leaders in that community with such strong, affectionate ties to Columbia. So I come nearly to the end, although I still have 2.5 months left. I'm not done yet. 3.5 months left. I come to the end with enormous gratitude and pride in the accomplishments that I am able to name, but also, you know, a list of things I wish I could have gotten around to. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve you, and I have strong hopes and prayers for the ongoing mission of Columbia Seminary. So, Marcy, those are the thoughts that I have to begin, and now I'll pass it back to you.
So can you talk more about, I was really struck by what you said about belonging and the importance of that certainly in a seminary community. I mean, I sort of feel like ever since I've left seminary, I've been looking for that level of community that I had at Columbia.
Yeah.
And, you know, just my kids even still talk about it. They were little when I was in seminary, and they're like, remember when there would just always be people showing up at our house at all times of the day and night, and you would like make them brownies, and then you guys would hang out, and like it, and it was like, I kind of felt like I was the den mother for my class. Like everybody just sort of would gather, and you know, and I think that belonging is something that has been so hard to find in our world, even before the pandemic, but certainly through the pandemic. So can you talk a little bit about belonging, and how that's worked out?
I'm really glad you noticed that, because ordinarily in institutions, including seminaries, we talk a lot about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've kind of started adding that B, belonging. So we really want to work for diversity, equity, inclusion, and have the result of all of that be that we belong to the same community, we belong to each other, we belong to God. I can't resist the temptation to just call out another one of my colleagues. Zena Regis is our campus chaplain, and she is new, and her appointment came as a result of students saying, we want more care for ourselves, for our community. So Zena and her ministry to us is really a result of that deep longing for belonging. And I think we're going to try to just say DEIB now and make it clear that there's a purpose to DEI, and it's belonging to one another and belonging to God as one community of faith and service. So are we there? No. Do we mess up? Yes. Are there specific steps that we can take to try to improve? Yes. I mean, I'm sure that everything I say about DEIB is what you are experiencing in your congregations too. So we're trying, y'all are trying, but we're really committed to that. Thanks, Marcy.
So it occurs to me that if you can find an A to add, then you can rearrange the letters and it can be abide. And there you go.
Okay, there's a challenge for everybody.
There's a challenge. Can you talk a little bit about um, you talked about some of the things that haven't gotten done, right?
Yeah,
What are the things that the alumni council, what are some things you would like us to pick up to carry on?
Wow. I probably would want about 5 minutes to think about that, but I love that question. And by the way, I always enjoyed coming to visit the alumni council when they had meetings on campus. You all always had a full agenda, but I loved just the 4 minutes that I was allotted to come and say hello, to say, you're the reason we exist. We are here to form and prepare pastoral leaders. And we need your feedback. And I still think that even on this screen. So Marcy, I got to think about that a little bit. Maybe others are ready with an answer, but I really love the question.
All right, so I'm gonna, we'll give her a minute to think about it. And
but did you see Lucy's suggestion in the chat?
No, I haven't got it.
Awesome.
Oh, good. We have acceptance, affirming, ambition. We got a couple of options.
Yeah, I didn't see the others. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to open the floor. I'll let you unmute yourselves. And if it's not too chaotic, we'll let it go that way. If it gets into utter chaos, we'll go back to raising your hands. But to let you ask questions, and if you have words of affirmation, other things you'd like to offer to President Van Dyke, feel free to unmute yourself and join the conversation.
Hi, I'm Jill Joyner, and I was at Columbia 2010 to 2016. And Leanne, I just want to thank you for the grace in which you came into Columbia, knowing that at the time we were still a community in grief.
Mm-hmm.
And you just came in lovingly and quietly. And allowed us to continue with our grief over the death of Steve, while also letting us know that you were there as the president, but not, there was no, boot kicking, arm slinging type stuff going on. And I will always keep that really close to heart, the grace that you just came into a grieving community. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Jill. I actually remember meeting you, Jill, in the courtyard of Decatur Presbyterian Church after the baccalaureate that year.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's really true. You think about the different times we get called into different spaces, and how different you have to show up in different ways in different places, and that gift of that you gave. Oh, there we have another one: authentic belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity.
There we have the word.
There's abide.
There's abide. I love that.
Hey, Dr. Van Dyke, it's John Daniel. Good to be with you here. I'm sure I'll see you again soon. For those who don't know me, my name's John Daniel Debevoise, and I'm a third-year Master of Divinity student here, so wrapping up the final semester. And there's a lot of things that have happened over the last 3 years that I'm very grateful for you for. One in particular, the pet policy, has been fantastic. As you know, we run into each other on the quad, walking our dogs. But I want to jump even more so back to before I was even a student. And I know we've talked about that interaction that we had, and I mean, to share with others. The year before I came to Columbia, I was living in Tampa, Florida, working at a church, and I had heard through the grapevine that there was an alumni, Andy Walton, in Clearwater, who was hosting a gathering at his house of members from his church, and the guest of honor was Dr. Leanne Van Dyke from Columbia Theological. And I was in the process of touring and visiting seminaries. And so I went just kind of on a whim to a stranger's house. And it was wonderful. I got to sit down and meet different people, but even more in particular, it always struck me in that moment how you took the time to engage with me. I mean, we must have sat there for 20, 30 minutes just talking.
Yeah.
And I've always said when I was looking at seminaries, I knew that I needed seminary, but I really wanted to find the seminary where that intersection of me needing seminary and that seminary needing me met. And I remember just in our talking that, you know, whatever ideas I was floating, because Lord knows what those were, that you said, those are the ideas we need at Columbia. And we need you, right? And so to be even on the cusp of entering seminary and being told that you're needed, that you're wanted, as we talk about that authentic belonging. Those words were so simple, yet so profound. And I've always been so grateful for the environment that you created, the message that you sold about Columbia without me even starting here. That I think after that, I didn't even look anywhere else. Because then when I came and stepped on campus, it was just clear. So, you know, I attribute so much of that to you and your leadership and nurturing of an environment where people can come and belong. So, you know, I'm filled with immense gratitude for you as a person, and for your contributions and stewardship to this place that we all love.
Thanks, JD. I remember that conversation in Clearwater as well. That was a fun time to meet you. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Van Dyke.
Hey, Al.
I had, I want to reemphasize what Jill said. I had the unusual experience of being here from 2014 until I finally graduated in 2021. And I guess the word that comes to my mind when I think about you is grace. And I met Steve Hayner and his wife, and I realized in my first year or so, this person is beloved. And whoever follows him will have a challenge, a real challenge. And I saw you do that with grace. And one of the graceful moments was a part of the We Are Columbia project, where we were meeting, I think on the patio of your house. And what I just remember your grace in that moment, and all of the incredible feelings that were expressed through that project, and it's a lasting capturing of that moment in time, and beautifully done.
Thanks, Al.
So a lot of grace. One other comment I want to make: most of my first career was primarily in information technology, and when I made the decision to apply at Columbia, one of the things that I heard, the buzz, when after Steve had gone, and you were being considered, I heard some alums saying she wants to emphasize online learning. Can you imagine? And I had many years of experience in IT, and I'll have to say that in 2020, the transition that was made in the classes I was taking to an online environment was almost seamless. And I'm sure there was tremendous amount of work that went on behind the scenes to prepare these excellent professors for this new world. And for that, you deserve a lot of kudos.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you
Al.
for your grace.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very kind of you.
Anybody else want to add anything? I know there's a couple of comments in the chat. I was just having a sidebar conversation with John Daniel, who was a YAD with my son Alden back at GA back in the before times when we met in person back then. So it was good to make that connection again. There's a question in the chat, Leanne, about
Yeah.
our commitment to the Presbyterian Church and the future of the PCUSA. That's a bigger question than the president of any one seminary could have, but I'll let you take a stab at it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Scott. We talk about that an awful lot at Columbia Seminary. And when we are able to release our new vision statement, I think all of the community, the alumni, the students, the faculty, the staff, the trustees who have been deeply involved in this project will be, I hope, really grateful and pleased for how strong the commitment to the Presbyterian Church is, without draining the openness and the hospitality to the wide family of denominational community members here. We just want the Reformed tradition to not be forced into an either or. It's not PCUSA or ecumenical. It's ecumenical precisely because we're PCUSA. You know, it's that deep root of hospitality and global wide open arms that the Presbyterian tradition at its best embodies. That's what we want to do. And our vision statement captures that and says it really strongly. So yes, we're very different than we were 30 years ago. We're much more diverse than we were when even some of you were at Columbia Seminary. But we're convinced that we're actually living theologically right straight out of our deep identity as a PCUSA or Reformed Theological Seminary. So we're trying to figure out how to walk that without falling over one way or the other, but neither walking on a knife edge. You know, this is actually a nice broad road, the both and, the ecumenical and Reformed. Scott, I hope that you will continue to see the commitment to our Presbyterian identity and origin story, and also be inspired, I hope, by the kind of ecumenical openness and courage that we have. So that's our conversation. That's the conversation that I'm going to kind of be stepping out of right at the moment where it's kind of coming to some fruition. And y'all are going to have to carry that on, because it's a high calling, and I hope we can all embrace it together.
Yeah, and I know many of the faces on these screens were in the earlier conversation about the repairing the breach, but one of the things I said in there that I think fits in with this conversation too is that in order for the church to be faithful, we have to have a lot of different voices in the conversation, and the best PCUSA is going to be a denomination that is involved in a much broader conversation than perhaps historically we have been. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to add one.
Okay.
Does anybody know what day it is today?
International Women's Day.
Yes. And I can't tell you, Leanne, how much joy it has brought me seeing you lead us so well. Leanne knows this, but we live in the same neighborhood, and sometimes we pass walking and I say, Leanne, I just don't know how you do your job. I could not do your job. And it's the truth. Leanne has had to put up with a lot, and Leanne has had to lead in situations that were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And Leanne has worked on the weekends and at night and first thing in the morning. And I really don't know how you have done it. You, I think, have set the bar really high for a lot of us women leaders and women in ministry. So thank you for leading, as they have said, with such grace, but not only that, with such guts. And you've made some hard calls.
Yeah.
You've been a good leader, and we're better for your time here.
You know, it occurred to me this morning how rare and noteworthy it is that the president, the vice president for academic affairs, and the board chair are all women. I'm not sure any seminary can boast that. And I think that's something to boast. And furthermore, that it's a racially diverse team of women leaders. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that I've been able to be encouraged and supported by equally amazing women leaders like you too, Julie Bailey. So thank you for your thank you, but I've been surrounded by wonderful women leaders. Thank you.
I'm gonna add in one thing.
Sarah.
I find knowing people's names to be really important. And Leanne, when I think one of the first times I passed you in the hallway and you knew my name, and that just spoke so much to me. And and there's so many times I was like, oh, I'm not important enough for her to bother to get to know my name. So so thank you for taking the time to get to know your students and getting to know people. And then coming back and you're like, oh, I've been following your adventures. So thank you for truly being invested in the lives of your students, whether or not they are still on campus or have graduated and moved on and moved across the pond as I have. So thank you for that.
We're cheering you on, Sarah.
Thank you.
Who else? Well, the rest of you are, Claire, go ahead, Claire.
Leanne has, as y'all have said, has done everything so well. And she wears more hats than I always fully appreciate. I have been on many times, that means at least 5 that I can remember. The last couple of years have been very hard in so many ways. And out of the blue, here will come an email from Leanne that is very pastoral, that is very comforting. And I'm not sure where the energy comes from, Leanne, to do that on top of everything else. I'm very grateful for your leadership in so many ways, which have already been denoted. And our opportunity to excel at virtual education, I am sure, will be good for us and the church in the years to come, specifically. Thank you.
You know, of all the difficulties and hurdles that we've had to encounter in COVID, there's been a sort of a strange gift to me that I'm not saying is worth it all.
Right.
But the gift has been that I've been able to function as a pastor to the community, especially before the vaccine came available, when everyone was really isolated and locked down. My weekly emails to the students, the staff, the faculty, the trustees, the emeriti gave me an opportunity to be a pastor in a way that I'll always treasure. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Claire, because it's been one of the things that's been a true gift to me in these last 2 years.
Well, it has been a COVID blessing for certain,
Yeah.
So I know you've been busy doing other things, Leanne, while we've been doing this, but it's been more than 5 minutes. And I wanted to know if you had any thoughts for marching orders you wanted to give to the alums to carry on.
I love it that I think the Alumni Association in the last 7 years under Julie's leadership, and Marcy under yours and your predecessors, is a more active, engaged organization. And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody else. I'm just saying I've appreciated the renewed sort of commitment and energy of the Alumni Association. And when I did have just a few minutes with you all during your meetings, I always appreciated you really want to know what is happening. How can we be supportive? So you're already doing what you've asked me to identify, namely you are invested, interested, you want details. Sometimes I wasn't able to give you all the detail because I myself was still kind of perhaps in a bit of a flurry around a certain issue, but I just want to encourage you to continue that kind of new pattern of investment, engagement, commitment, transparency. I think my successor will appreciate an alumni association that asks for and even demands that kind of transparency. so that we're not giving you a nice package. We're giving you the real story insofar as we're able. We do have some restrictions to how much we can fill in details now and then, but I commend you for living into a pattern that I would really hope continues.
Thank you. I saw his little Zoom box a while ago, but I'm going to turn it over to Todd Speed right now to talk. All right, where'd you go, Todd?
I'm here.
There you are. Go ahead. Hi there.
I bring you greetings from my little Zoom box and from the Board of Trustees, from Decatur Presbyterian Church, about a mile from the seminary, and from the seminary neighborhood. I live on Oldfield Road now. Some of you may have taken walks or jogs down Oldfield while you're at the seminary. Scott Huey may have thrown a Frisbee all the way down the road.
Looks like Oldfield Road is having internet connections. Let's see.
Was it because Scott Huey threw a Frisbee?
Scott Huey threw a Frisbee through his internet.
Probably.
All right. Well, while Todd's internet unfreezes. Was there?
Oh, that's a shame. It happens though, doesn't it?
He'll be, I know, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Sarah put a comment in the chat too, related to that. And I was thinking when Julie was talking about when I was at Columbia, there were classmates of mine, female classmates of mine, who had answered the call to come to seminary, and they had never seen a woman preach before they got there. And it just always floored me that they were able to answer that call when they'd never seen it done. Because I remember the first woman I saw preach when I was 10 years old, thinking, who knew that could, who knew? That's it. I didn't think I wanted the job, but I remember noticing that there was somebody in that job. So it's, and this was in 2005 when I showed up at seminary, and there were women who'd never seen another woman preach before they were there. Okay, wait, Todd, looks like Todd might be back.
Oh,
but you're
now
muted
he's unmuted.
But now you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Our internet at the church just went out, so I'm on with my phone now. So, are we? Can I start back where I was, or did y'all already cover it?
Start back from the beginning. We said that that Huey threw a Frisbee through your internet, and that's what happened. So that's our story. Go ahead.
Was he stuck again? Oh dear.
Task force, and part of that's because of my friendship with Leanne, which deepened over the course of the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, Leanne and I went with a group from Columbia and others down to the Bahamas, and we kayaked for almost a week down there and among the islands, and just had a great time. And we have enjoyed puppy play dates and hikes and dinners since then. I love getting to know Rachel, her daughter, and Corey, her daughter's fiance, and so it's been a joy to get to know Leanne more in these last several years. So we've got some great things planned, and I want to share two of them with you today. First is the retirement celebration dinner on May 16th, which is a Monday of commencement week. We're going to have a big celebration dinner on campus, honoring Leanne and celebrating all the good things. And so any alumni who are interested or in attending or know more about it, contact Julie Bailey, and she'll be glad to fill you in with details. So Monday, May 16th, and I'd love to see you all. It's great to see some familiar faces on this Zoom, and would love to see you all there. The second thing I want to announce is the Leanne Van Dyke Voices for Visions Fund. We're going to honor Leanne's legacy in support of Columbia's future service to the church by building this permanent fund that's going to support what we call Columbia conferences. There have been 2 Columbia conferences in the past during Leanne's tenure. One of them was on Bible and Empire, the other one on migrations, and it brought in scholars and poets and others to speak to some of these critical issues and current conversations in the church. And the fund will enable these conferences to continue and deepen their impact. And the fund will underwrite resources for alumni and pastors and churches and scholars. really to speak into the public square and to welcome public conversations with Columbia's scholars. So we're very excited about the Columbia conferences and this Leanne Van Dyke Voices for Vision Fund to make that possible. The fundraising effort's already started, and I understand that it's going well, and its final success will be announced at the May 16th dinner, but I know it's already going well. So there's a link in the chat you can look at later, or you can contact Julie Bailey or David Huffine about it. So very honored to be part of this retirement celebration fund, and very grateful for Leanne and her friendship and her leadership of the seminary through all the ups and downs of the past 7 years, and look forward to this celebration.
Wow.
Thank you, Todd. So before the next event on your schedule at the top of the hour will be preaching hard texts, and I'm sure we have no idea what that could be about. And it's clearly a much needed conversation for the world. So I hope you'll join us for that. We are going to ask Leanne to give us a benediction blessing. But before we do that, Leanne, I would like to give you a blessing for a new beginning. And this is from John O'Donohue. And so for what is next for you, we are excited. We are so thankful for what you have given to us, and for your leadership and grace that has gotten us, through this breach, and for the ways you have repaired and restored and renewed us. So, for a new beginning by John O'Donohue. In out of the way places of the heart where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, and wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled as you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Amen.
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 Dear friends, please receive this closing benediction. May the strength of God sustain you in all that we face in our callings of service and leadership. May the power of God preserve you even in the face of evil, pain, and loss. May the compassion of God protect you and those you love, and those you do not even know around the world. May the Spirit of God direct you to be faithful followers of Jesus Christ. And may the love of God surround you this day and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.